Assalamu alaikum. As-salatu was-salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. There is a strong connection between adl, justice, and huqouq, the rights. That is why it is said, justice is giving every right its due. Giving exactly what is due will be justice. If you give less, it is zolm, or injustice. If you give more, it is fazl, or grace. This is apparently taken from the Quran, Surah Hud, that says, وَيُؤْتِ كُلَّ ذِي فَضْلٍ فَضْلَهُ, and bestows His grace on all who merit His grace. In Islam, we have several rights, huqouq, to consider. In today's session, we will discuss each with examples, inshallah. As reported in the books of history like At-Tabari or Kamil fi Tarikh and others, that early Muslims, when they entered the other nations, they had three fundamental messages for them when they were asked why they were there. Number one, we were sent to free you from worshiping and serving the servants of God to worshiping and serving God Himself. Number two, we were sent to rid people from the injustice committed against them by the distorted and deviated faiths and invite them to Islamic justice. Number three, we were sent to invite you away from this limited material world to the everlasting, unlimited world to come hereafter. So here, the second message is about setting people free from the shackles and injustices committed against them by the distorted and superstitious faiths who had created different classes of people, hence inequity, and instead inviting them to Islamic justice that says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا. O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even if it is against yourselves or your parents or your kin, and whether it be against rich or poor. Chapter 4, verse 135. Now, the rights, huqouq, are divided into three. The rights of self, the right a person has on himself. The rights of people, and then the rights of God. Many do not pay attention to the rights of self or rights of a person on himself. For example, people put themselves through hardship for unnecessary physical pain and or psychological pain for something without merit, something useless. Going through extremes to stress the body or part of a body, for example, listening to something loud that stresses the hearing and eventually results in hearing loss if it continues. Same with eyes, reading in low light, etc., etc. People who go and do cosmetic surgery, for example, to make them look young or shape their face, their nose, without a valid reason like accident or medical. This excess in spending resources and interfering with the nature without Allah's permission, these deeds are Islamically questionable. There are people who waste their time doing something totally useless. Some call it entertainment, some call it hobby, some call it chilling. Nothing against any of this if it's done in moderation. But Even entertainment or hobby or chilling time all have limits. Then there are those who overeat. They eat to the hilt, where they can hardly breathe. As a result, they get fat, and with obesity comes diabetes, heart problems, high blood pressure. They can barely walk. Or on the other hand, there are those, especially among young women, who go to another extreme, starve themselves so they do not gain weight and hence look good. As a result, deny themselves from all the nutrients their body needs for physical and psychological health. And the physical and psychological health that actually comes only from healthy diet. In doing so, people commit injustice against themselves. فَلَا تَظْلِمُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not commit injustice against yourselves. We always think sins occur when we commit injustice against others. But indeed, it can also be against oneself. One who thinks or drinks alcohol in the privacy of his own home. He's not driving or not even getting drunk or disturbing the peace. But he's still committing a sin, doing something haram because he is committing zolm against himself, his nafs. Our bodies and our minds are amana, trust from Allah. We cannot do whatever we want with them. There is a hadith from the Prophet, peace be upon him, that says, your eyes, your ears, other members of your body have rights upon you. Means you cannot overwork them. So later in life, you end up having to go through all kinds of treatments or surgery to overcome them. Everything has a limit. So a person has a right upon himself. And of course, this has many aspects and details. So we have to be very careful. As Quran says, وَمَنْ يَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ. And anyone who exceeds the limits of Allah, he has indeed wronged himself. Chapter 61, verse 1. The second form of injustice, zolm, which is injustice to others. And that is something we're all familiar with. This type also has numerous aspects and forms as well. It can range from committing zolm, injustice against an individual, or several others, or the whole society. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib said, اجعل نفسك ميزانا بينك وبين غيرك. Put yourself, your nafs, as mizan. Mizan means standard between you and others. Put yourself as mizan or standard between you and others. فأحبب لغيرك ما تحب لنفسك. Love for others that which you love for yourself. وأكره له ما تكره له. Dislike for others that which you dislike for yourself. This is a good formula that in many cases helps us not fall into trap of zolm, injustice. Prophet ﷺ also has a similar narration and said, none of you has believed until he wants for his brothers and sisters that which he wants for himself. And he does not want for them that which he does not want for himself. He also said, avoid zolm, injustice, as zolm is zulumat, darkness in Qiyamah. Where did they get this from? They got it from Quran, which talks about a specific case, and they generalized it. Quran draws a picture of a scene where relatives have gathered around a person who is about to leave this world. He wants to make a will, wasiyah. He says, give this much to so-and-so, give that much to so-and-so. What about his wife and children? Well, God is great, He will take care of them. There are people who do this kind of thing. Those who are present must alert him as they would feel for their own children, for their own family. Allah is great, true, but the person has to take care of his family, the one that he's leaving behind. The other interpretation, so that was one interpretation of the verse. The other one is that when you are in charge of distributing the wealth, be careful and do not commit injustice in distribution, especially to orphans, by not following his direction, the deceased's direction, and distribute it to your own advantage. The verse says, fear Allah, put yourself in the deceased's situation. Imagine you are dying and leaving behind your helpless family, children. Would you like someone to do the same to your family, your children? So, fear Allah and say it correctly to them. Convey the wasiyah exactly and properly to all of his family members. And that the verse is وَلْيَخْشَ الَّذِينَ لَوْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّةً ضَعَافًا خَافُوا عَلَيْهِمْ فَلْيَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلْيَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. Let those disposing of an estate have the same fear in their minds as they would fear for their own if they had left a helpless family behind. Let them fear Allah and speak appropriately and just. Chapter 4, verse 9. And then, of course, the next verse, finalizes, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى ظُلْمًا إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا فَسَيَصْلَوْنَ سَعِيرًا. Those who devour the orphan's wealth unjustly, those who devour the orphan's wealth unjustly, they swallow fire into their bellies, and they will be exposed to burning flames. This is the next verse, verse 10. So here Quran has spoken about mizan, a standard, yardstick, by which we can assess what we're doing. اجعل نفسك ميزانا بينك وبين غيرك. Put yourself as mizan, standard, between you and others, which is similar to the verse but generalized. This is so we understand Zolm to others is one of the most detestable behavior one can have, and we must eradicate it from our nafs. And just so we have a rule, a standard to refer to, I should immediately put myself in place of other person. I'm cheating him, I'm taking advantage of him. In all honesty, would I like for someone else to do the same to me? This has to go through our mind. Injustice starts from something like cussing someone, lying to someone that could hurt him, backbiting someone, or slandering someone, then to bigger things like murder, stealing, etc., etc. These are very clear and usually understood by most people. But then there are those that are subtle and may not be readily understood by some people. But the same principle applies. If one puts himself in others' shoes, all of a sudden he becomes kinder, more compassionate, more soft-hearted, less inclined to commit injustice, especially to those who have no one to defend them. What we call madlumeen, to every sense of the word. They have no one but God. you are committing injustice against a person who has no one, no refuge except with Allah. How will we answer Allah in that day? A zalim, an aggressor, might say, well, if she has no helper but Allah, why did Allah give me time then? Quran says, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ اللَّهَ قَافِلًا عَمَّا يَعْمَلَ الظَّالِمُونَ إِنَّمَا يُؤَخِّرُهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ تَشْخَصُ فِيهِ الْأَبْصَارُ. And do not think Allah is unaware of what the unjust, what the aggressors do. He only respites them to a day on which the eyes will stare in horror. Chapter 14, verse 42. The verse implies you think the time is to your benefit. No, it is so you sink deeper into your wickedness. Prophet ﷺ said, "Man khafa al-qisasa taraka dhulm an-nas." Anyone who fears the divine retribution, the divine qisas, he will abandon injustice. And we must try our best to do so. Some injustices we do not pay attention to. Perhaps they are subtle. For example, the Social Security Office or administration gives some allowance to those elderly who are poor and do not have any source of income. It is called SSI. There are then those who are elder and retired, perhaps in other countries, and have money, lots of money and property in their own country. They can afford to live here, mashallah, and pay for their own medical bills. Yet, still come here and apply for those few $100s of SSI. They lie in the application that they do not have any source of income. Isn't that injustice against others who truly need this money? Another example. I saw this mother beating her son and using awful words. And when you say something, she says, "It is my kid," as if since it is her kid, she can do whatever she pleases. If this is your child, you are his mother, you should have even more compassion toward him, not humiliating him in front of others. Yes, kids need to learn. They need tarbiyah. But they should be taught in a kindly manner, not through humiliation. Yes, kids have rights on us as well, but we take it all for granted. And same goes with the man who feels superior to members of his family and physically abuses his wife and children. The wife may not be physically able to defend herself and has no helper except Allah. So he feels free to punch her and beat her in any way he can because no one is there to stop him. There is no policeman or a government official present. I beat her up 10 times before and she did not complain, so I can continue. Don't you fear Allah? How are you going to answer him? Marriage is a contract, not an ownership of your spouse. You want to raise your children soft-hearted and compassionate toward others. You see your son doing something cruel to an animal, like hitting a cat or a dog. You should kindly bring his attention to the fact that this is a creation of God and has life. Tell him, would you like it if someone did this to you? Would that not hurt you? Would you not call for mom and dad for help? This animal is helpless. It means we set standard, mizan, between himself and that animal. All this to soften his heart and raise his awareness So he is raised with mercy and compassion toward others. This is called a natural tarbiyah, and the noble Quran and the Messenger of God have emphasized it. Being a Muslim means to be fair and have conscience when it comes to rights of others. This was one of the main missions of all prophets, to prevent Zolm, injustice. You know, we're here for a short time to live a pious life, a righteous life, not to cheat and take advantage and commit injustice against others. Islam says even your enemy has rights upon you. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا. O you who believe, stand out firmly for Allah as witnesses for fair dealings, and let not the hatred of others turn you away from justice. Deal justly. Chapter 5, verse 8. We will talk a bit more on this topic of Zolm to others in another session, with an example that has caused so many problems in Muslim countries and communities, an issue which is a symptom of this kind of injustice against others. Now, the third type is injustice or Zolm against Allah. One might ask, how can I commit Zolm, injustice against Almighty God who owns everything? Yes, you can, by not giving him his due rights. Allah is not going to be hurt by it, or he does not gain or lose anything. But that's irrelevant. You're not giving his due rights. It is like, you owe a friend who happened to be rich $1,000 and promised to pay it back at the end of the month. And at the end of the month, when he asks for it, you say to him, it is his right, but you're not going to pay him back because he's rich and he does not need it. That's irrelevant. What are Allah's rights? Well, truly believing in his oneness, Tawheed, and acting on it accordingly. Inna shirka la dhulmun azim. Indeed, shirk is the highest injustice, highest wrongdoing against God and yourself. His rights including making all ibadat, worship, pure and on time for him, as he prescribed, as he commanded. For example, when it is prayer time, we must do so giving the top priority he deserves. We don't wait till almost Maghrib time and pray both Dhuhr and Asr together right before the sun goes down. The intention to pray Dhuhr in Asr time is a form of lie, because it is no longer Dhuhr time. His rights include obeying his commandments. These are all among rights of Allah Azza wa Jal. We should not prioritize our lives with things that are unimportant instead of things that are important, especially when it comes to God's rights. See how comprehensive Quran is when it says, قل إنما حرم ربي الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن والإثم والبغي بغير الحق وأن تشركوا بالله ما لم ينزل به سلطانا وأن تقولوا على الله ما لا تعلمون. Say the things that my Lord has, this starts with قل, O Prophet, tell them, the things that my Lord has indeed forbidden are shameful, indecent deeds, whether open or secret, sins and trespasses against truth or without reason, assigning partners to Allah, for which He has given no authority, and saying things about Allah of which you have no knowledge. Chapter 7, verse 33. Here Quran talks about indeed the acts that are indecent, that which is committed openly or in secret. Of course, in secret means against oneself. Then trespassing without just reason is about rights of people. And then it talks about assigning partners to Allah, shirk, and then saying things about Him that one has no knowledge of, like attributing things to Allah, changing His laws, changing what He has forbidden and what He has permitted, all of which are about the rights of Allah. In one verse, Quran summarizes all three rights we have been talking about, short and profound, underscoring the fact the right path is the path of Quran indeed. But one must think and reflect. Another testament that it is words of the Creator Himself. We have talked about rights we have on ourselves, rights of others, and rights of Allah Azza wa Jal. There are other rights on us, like rights of animals, rights of trees, rights of environment, etc., etc. In a nutshell, a Muslim should continuously be aware of his surrounding and be vigilant in staying away from any act of transgression. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal help us understand His rights and rights of others upon us. We ask Allah to help us remove all ill feelings, anger, and distress from our hearts. We ask Allah to help us and guide us so we do not commit injustice against Him, others, and ourselves, and make us among the God conscious. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Assalamu ala man ittaba'a al huda.